So, I saw Sausage Party last night, and I am still laughing when I think back on my experience. For me, Sausage Party is absolutely the funniest film of the year at this point. But first, I feel I must state the obvious with a small disclaimer after making a claim like that. Comedy is even more subjective for me than what people decide makes films good or bad. From person to person, humor is completely different in terms of what makes someone laugh. I mean, I feel like that's pretty obvious, but for me, I personally greatly enjoy the Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg films, and I still recognize that they aren't always the most clever comedians, even though sometimes I think they can be, but they mostly lean towards the more crude and obscene genre of humor. And for those of you who don't know, their films include anything that they've been in, written, directed, or produced together to some degree. For me, Knocked Up, Superbad, Pineapple Express, Funny People, This Is the End, and Neighbors are the films of theirs that I thoroughly enjoy. There are other films of theirs that they've made that I just don't find nearly as funny. But if you enjoy those films, or at least a couple of them, then it's very likely you will enjoy this movie. If you don't like any of those films, you will hate Sausage Party because this movie does what every one of those films did and amps it up. The obscenities, vulgarity, racial stereotypes, discussions on religion, the existence of God, social commentary, sex, sexuality, many food puns, a complete dismantling and obscenely funny spoof of the Pixar formula, and one of the raunchiest, funniest, vile, disgusting, insanely craziest scenes I have ever witnessed in a film that had the entire audience howling in laughter, disgust, and sheer shock. You can't prepare for the scene near the end of this film. It doesn't seem real, and I believe the MPAA only let them get away with an R rating and avoided an NC-17 rating because this scene is done with animated food and food-related products. The most amazing part about this movie is that they combine so many different types of humor, from the absolutely most obscene and vulgar to some incredibly clever social, political, and racial commentary, to discussions on religious beliefs, and even some insanely stupid but really funny food puns. They also made the film self-aware and meta at times, which made it even more fun to watch. Furthermore, this film is scored very well by Alan Menken. This man has scored a plethora of Disney animated films, like Beauty and the Beast, Pocahontas, and The Little Mermaid. To think that they were actually able to hire a man who makes a living scoring Disney animated movies to score this disturbingly crude movie is insane and mind-blowing. Additionally, the animation is quite good. It's obvious they spent quite a bit of time making sure the animation could be done by a studio that would make it look just as good as the computer animated children's films that Pixar, DreamWorks, and other competitors are putting out right now. Sony handled part of it, and then the studio in Canada handled the majority of the animation. I thought they did a commendable job. I still firmly believe that Pixar's animation is definitely better in DreamWorks as well, but for a film like this that knows that it's never being taken seriously from beginning to end, it is nice to see how much time and effort was put into it, even to make sure it looked as good as possible. I must also point out that the voice cast in this film is tremendously hilarious. It is basically everyone from the main group of friends in the film This Is the End, with a few other actors that are, those guys are all basically friends in real life, and for the most part, the majority of them are all in there, and I didn't even realize who some of them were voicing until I saw the credits roll. Others are quite obvious who the voice is, and overall the voice cast was fantastically hilarious. My biggest complaint with the film lies firmly in two areas. The first being the story. It's pretty stupid. And I'm sure that is part of the reason it took Goldberg and Rogen nearly a decade to get a studio to finance this project. There are points in the film where the laughs start to let up for a moment, so then you're kind of stuck with watching the story of a bunch of food unfold that you really could care less about, which you know is not supposed to be taken seriously at all in the first place, given who's making the film. And they also try to throw in a few scenes that are kind of emotional. I guess maybe it's an attempt at satire on the way we become emotionally invested in Pixar films, but I don't even think they were going for that. I just think they simply had to try and space out some of the laughs and gags and the crazy scenes, and they filled those spaces with their story development. Fortunately, the film is very short, so the ridiculously stupid story doesn't really ever weigh down the comedy and the satire in the film. Secondly, the obscenities. It gets to a point in the film, and I actually kind of noticed it immediately, that they were swearing as frequently as possible and trying to say the word fuck as frequently as possible because, hey, look, it's animated food products like a Pixar film saying the word fuck in a movie, so it's funny, right? And I did think in moments that watching a film that seemed so much like a Pixar movie was just plain funny to see animated characters cursing incessantly. Even though there's nothing clever about it, it just got a little worn out and tiresome after a while. I will say that as much stupid face value humor is in this movie, it's met equally with as much thought-provoking satire and social, political, religious, and racial commentary, which lifted it high above being labeled just an animated film where you can see Pixar-esque characters talking like South Park characters. So I kind of mentioned it earlier in this video, and I want to mention it again without spoiling anything. There is a scene at the end of this film that without a doubt will have you doing or feeling one or more of the following: crying, laughing, squirming in your seat, shocked, disgusted, embarrassed, and feeling utterly uncomfortable. The scene is groundbreaking in the most shameful sense of the word. If anything, go see this film for that scene alone and don't read anything about it. If you aren't offended or disgusted easily, then you will have your money's worth for just this scene, which is most likely to go down as one of the most talked about scenes in a film this year and maybe possibly ever in a comedy. For this scene alone, I bumped my final score of this film up an entire point. I enjoyed this film very much, and I'm giving Sausage Party an 8.5 out of 10. I just really hope that Rogen and Goldberg continue to push boundaries with their reprehensible humor. Thanks for watching, and keep watching movies.
What did he do to you? You don't want to fucking know.